again, everyone. It's the Smooth Thrills Radio Hour, beaming up to the satellites from Old East Dallas to locations all over the Earth. England, nice to hear from you again. Italy, thanks for stopping by. You stay classy, San Diego. We certainly hope you all enjoyed our last episode about the blob and the horrors of various Jell-O-based life forms. But Series 4 must carry on. And in this episode, we're going to look back at the early 1970s and a movie that came out of a sort of a new Hollywood Lost in America genre, a film called Aloha, Bobby, and Rose. Nathan and Katie are back to talk about this classic movie. Oh, by the way, if you're Katie's friend with the tiny dancer tattoo, we want to hear from you. Send photos to our Instagram or email us autopilot@smoochthrillsradiohour.com. And don't worry, you'll know what I'm talking about when we get to that part of the show. But first, I gotta warn you about something. It's never a dull moment hanging out with Bobby and Rose, but you gotta watch out for Bobby. His ideas of a good time can be a little weird.
Want to ride on a donkey? I know a good donkey you can ride on.
More of a Gene Shalit sort of approach
Fuck
to it.
the medveds. Fuck the medveds, okay?
Who are they?
The inventors of the Golden Turkey Awards.
What is that?
Those fuckers. The ones that said Plan 9 from Outer Space was the worst film ever made.
Well, that's
Clearly
why
it does
this
not.
movie exists.
Oh my
No.
god.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
No, it's because something like Son of Paleface exists.
Hey, wait a minute. You said if that was going to be in a certain box set, you would buy it too. Come on, Bob Hope. Come on.
Bob Hope, okay, Jane Russell's in it, I think. Okay.
I do like Bob Hope.
Then you'll love...
Road to Morocco.
We're on the road trip trail here. So let's get it going. Now, you may disagree with me, but I'm of the opinion
Given
that
I'm one of us.
Yeah. I'm of the opinion that the great 60s Summer of Love died the day the first Alice Cooper record came out. Some may disagree with me on that benchmark. I think it works. But whatever you think about that, by 1975, no one could really deny that it was all well and truly over with. All the flowers and feel-good vibes had gone away, and America's teens were starting to realize that instead of the often promised life of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, they were actually going to get single motherhood, dead-end jobs at the mechanic shop, endless nights of driving around in circles, and occasionally losing your wallet if you ever really had one in the first place. Some gave in and settled into that life. Some took off on the open road like the wild angels to ride their machines and get loaded, looking for some version of the American life they'd always heard about but never really seen for themselves. And then some decided to take a chance and leave their life behind entirely and take a fantastic voyage to someplace else. A place that really only existed in their dreams, even if they insisted on calling it Hawaii. Deep down they knew, however, that no matter what, the real world was going to catch up with them, sometimes violently. And the journey was ultimately doomed. Such is the journey of Bobby and Rose. Aloha, Bobby and Rose is the movie we're talking about this time. Welcome back to the Smooth Thrills Radio Hour. We have some opinions about this movie, I can already tell.
I do love the soundtrack.
The soundtrack
Very
is amazing.
much for the soundtrack.
I don't know, was the soundtrack ever available? I don't know if it was ever
No.
released.
I mean, all you got to do is put on an Elton John playlist, and then you got it.
They do dip
I
into the
made
Elton
my
John
own,
well a few
my own
times.
soundtrack album to this film, Katie, so they're
Good,
more
I
than
like
just
it.
Elton John.
But I love Elton John, so that's what stuck out for me.
Ah. But it is a perfect time capsule of 1975 Los Angeles. It captures that feeling really, really well. A lot of movies do. I think Van Nuys was one of them.
Van Nuys Boulevard?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the one. By the way, before we get too deep into this, I've never heard the man's name pronounced. So how is the director's name pronounced? Is it Floyd Mutrux? Mutrux is his name.
It's Mutrux, so it's like Mew Trucks.
Mutrux. I've never
Yeah,
heard the
it's
guy's
the
name
double
pronounced.
U is what throws it off. You think
Ah.
it could be any, yeah.
He was one of those guys. He was definitely a talented director who sort of got lost. I mean, say what you want about the new Hollywood movement of the early 70s and everybody that came out of it, but they tended to kill their darlings too, and this guy was one of them. He didn't get a lot of chances after this movie came out. I mean, American Hot Wax, fantastic. Hollywood Nights, arguably a good movie. And then he just never got a shot at directing again for no real apparent reason. And I'm not sure what it was.
Some television, and his stuff was always mired in unavailability too. Like Hollywood Nights was never officially released on video until 2000, 20 years later. It was a cult classic, having aired on Cinemax and HBO continually.
Yeah.
And Aloha, Bobby and Rose was available on Media Home Entertainment on VHS, but it was one of those that was like way out of print until Anchor Bay first put it on DVD. And then American Hot Wax still haven't gotten a release on that. And that's, as you know, most of it has to do with music.
Yeah. Well, Aloha, Bobby and Rose was not a obscure movie. I mean, this thing was the 7th highest grossing movie of 1975. It made $35 million on a budget of $600,000. By any measure, it was incredibly successful, and then just kind of disappeared.
Yeah.
I suppose I don't think I ever saw it on cable. I just happened across it by accident one time.
I had never even heard of it until you put it on the list for this season.
Well, now
And,
it
like,
is very obscure, yes.
I'm definitely like not as knowledgeable as you guys, but I still am in the movie circle enough that it's like I've heard of like not most things, but you get what I'm saying. Like I feel like I had at least would have heard this name somewhere, but I'm not even.
Sure. Well, considering what came out along with it in that spring 1975, that March, April, May period, you're talking about such classics as Super Vixens, Dolomite, Death Race 2000, Monty Python and the Holy Grail, Switchblade Sisters, The Happy Hooker, Escape to Witch Mountain, Brannigan, Sheba Baby. Okay, but it's in good company, and for it to come out of that whole mess and be as successful as it was really says something, and how it got to be where it is now is a little strange. I mean, sure, there's a lot of movies out there, and they kind of get shuffled around. Maybe it was the genre. I don't know. Maybe it was too crowded a genre for it to exist, because there was a lot of these kind of movies that were coming along over that course of 10 years. We mentioned Easy Rider is one of them. The Wild Angels could maybe factor into that. You had Vanishing Point. What else am I thinking of here?
Does it have a cult following now?
in Blue.
Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry would be another one I would throw into that mix.
All of these titles I've never even heard of.
I think Mutrix in general has a cult following. His films are always in this category.
Okay.
It's important to note that this was an independent production that Columbia distributed theatrically. So it reverted rights back to the independents. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that it kind of didn't languish as well. Because like I said, it was distributed via Media Home Entertainment, which picked up all independent features for the most part. So Columbia didn't have that push, although later they made Hollywood Nights with him, which was a Polygram co-production. Yeah, I think they had to renew the rights for that in order to release it in 2000. Yeah, I think it just kind of, it's weird, like what he says, that something so successful at the time is obscure now by definition. It's very odd.
But it definitely does go into the availability thing too. Like that does suck.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know that this was on re-releases in theaters through Columbia or not. I'm not sure.
I don't think so.
But you have to think this was kind of the era when Jaws was right around the corner and the blockbuster films that started changing the industry. So these type of personal films, they were still being made throughout the late 70s into the early 80s, but they just didn't get that same
wasn't any
level of
room.
exposure.
Wasn't any breathing room for them, yeah. Because I think Jaws came out like 2 months after this movie, possibly.
Yeah, June.
It's pretty close.
Yeah.
This was an April release. And it wasn't terribly well reviewed either. New York Times said the only tragic thing in a film like this is the quality of stupidity the characters are forced to exhibit in order to keep the plot going. Okay. Variety, Youth on the Lamb themes, a staple of so many picks in the last 10 years, is getting tired. And our beloved Gene Siskel, who said, one of those overwrought sob stories about a young couple who are always getting in trouble. The guy's got a slightly brutish outlook on the world. The girl knows how to twist her hair and cry a lot. She doesn't cry a lot. She cries an
Are you
adequate
kidding?
amount, and that's about it. Come on. What do you mean, am I
He has
kidding?
to like peel her off the pavement after the shooting in the gas station.
Well, why wouldn't
it was
you,
a shooting at a gas
honestly,
station?
To me,
her whole world is over as she knows it at that point.
Sure.
Every single one of the characters in this, especially the two leads, are the most non-redeemable people that I could not find an ounce of remorse for.
You didn't find Paul Lamont like dashing in a young Steve Railsback sort of a way? And
if you believe what the guy said about him having been there the week before robbing them,
yeah.
If you were like, I felt nothing for these characters.
Well, they're not perfect by any means, of course.
Right, and I get that, but
and you could definitely argue like Paul Lamant's character for sure, and then Diane Hull leaving her child.
But she literally says at one point,
went to Disneyland.
I have to go back to him because his dad just left, so I can't too. So that's the only reason you want to return to your child, because he already lost one parent? Like,
I got the impression from the beginning of that trip that she knew it wasn't going to hold. She was
also,
in
it for the weekend, and that was going to be it.
Yeah.
Did they met?
This
and
whole
went
thing
out
takes
that
place
night,
over like
right?
2 or 3 days. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that is also mind-boggling to me. But I also just can't stand people and being near them for like 5 minutes. So like maybe the whole concept of falling in love in one night is just so beyond unrealistic to me that it's like you literally put everything you had on the line for that guy. This movie should be called Red Flags.
Well, he does want to get her in the...
This is what that movie should be called.
He does try to get her in the backseat of a VW Beetle, which doesn't have a backseat to my memory.
The second he looked at that guy that wanted the job where he made $6.50 an hour and was like, oh, but what time do you have to get up? I'll stick with my $3 an hour job so I can come in at noon. And I'm just like, you're a deadbeat. Like,
he's talking himself.
I'm sorry
into
that I
That's
didn't
it.
like.
They're not hiding that. I mean, she's almost as damaged as he is as a person. Like she's made some bad decisions too. And for me, it isn't so much about the characterizations, it's about the fantasy of them falling for each other. And the road trip, the hangout movie is something that was lost at that time. And I think a lot of it is just being in that world with them, whether you agree with them or not, or you decide, like I'm raising my hand too, but you know, like certain decisions, I'm like, I don't know about that, but I'm going along with it.
This was pretty common. There are a lot of movies like this. I mean, I mentioned Dirty Larry, Crazy Mary, or I get it backwards every time. Sorry about that.
Dirty Mary, Crazy Mary.
That notion of all we got to do is get in the car and escape.
Right.
Yeah, but usually you want to see that outcome. Like you want to see where it goes. That movie. But there was no ounce of like, I care where this is going. And maybe that's unfair of me, but like.
It is noted though.
Where it was going, I think you need to watch Two-Lane Blacktop. Now, Monty Hellman says this is not an existential movie, but it totally is. Those characters have made the escape. They now exist in this, and this is just my interpretation of Two-Lane Blacktop. You may disagree. They exist in this sort of purgatory world of just endless drag racing, and they just move from one race to the next. They encounter different people. No one has a name. They're the driver, the mechanic, GTO, and the girl are the characters. And that's where Bobby and Rose are trying to get to, whether they realize it or not, but they can't because they're too anchored in the real world. She has a kid, and he's absolutely hopeless. They'll never make it, and you know that from the beginning. I do agree with his sentiment
on the fact that there was nothing they could do once that kid got shot, that they would not be believed. I do totally agree with that and understand that. But I would have felt remorse for them, especially him. Maybe I'm being unfair to her, but especially for you just robbed the store last week. So you're not innocent in this. Had you not fake robbed this store today, but the guy says you were just here last week. You stole $250 and the wedding ring that my father gave my mother or I gave my wife or something like that. I just watched it this morning. So unless that guy is just alluding to a robbery the week before,
I think that's
always
more of what he is saying.
See, I took it as in because this guy's always strapped for cash.
I mean, yeah, he's a bit of a grifter. You
know what I
argue
mean?
that for sure. Yeah.
So, like, if you take it as in he was in there last week, so you can say, "Hey, we're innocent in this kid getting shot," but had you not fake quote unquote robbed the store, the kid would have never gotten shot. And do we know if it was even fake? He was leading her to believe it was fake, but was he really trying to get money out of the guy at the register?
He doesn't strike me as being a competent enough guy to actually pull off a robbery.
I don't, but yeah. I mean, like, I'm just trying to give you my viewpoint on it.
Sure.
Well, and there's also the frustration of the moment where you're going, why would you do that?
Yeah.
Don't fuck around like that, you know?
That isn't something that you just mess with, you know?
She is clearly on board with your journey. You don't need to do this show-off thing in the store to get her on board any more than she already
But I took it as in, because they are stopping to get beer and wine, to then go to the pool hall where he has to pay his tab of $75 to $80 because he went into it the night before not having enough money. Not the night before or whatever.
In the process.
Yeah, so it's like, I just feel like, I'm curious now if the intention was to get money there or if it was just playing around.
I think it's ambiguous for a reason, though, too.
Yeah, but isn't it interesting
like,
how
all roads lead to nowhere
from
the get-go? And if you try to analyze it and make sense of it, you know that, I mean, you know from that sequence they're doomed. There's no way they can, like, even toward the end there's a moment where you think, oh, maybe he can get out of it, but you know he's not going to.
No, I mean, those roads leading to nowhere also is something that's alluded to in Dirty Crazy, because what gets under Larry's skin is when the guy in the back seat refers to him as a round and rounder, as the guy who just does he just does the round trip race, never actually going anywhere. Kind of like the guy at the beginning, kind of like in the beginning of Sofia Coppola's movie Somewhere, where he's just kind of going around in a circle and can never ever get out of it. That's Bobby and Rose also.
But also it's worth noting...
Threw a lot out there just then, I'm sorry about that.
No. But that brings up a good point, because I don't know, Katie, if you've seen American Graffiti, but this is very much an extension of Paul Le Mat's character in that, John Milner, which you could argue is equatable to like a Matthew McConaughey and Dazed and Confused type, where he's kind of stuck in this world.
Yeah, just kind of. I have seen Dazed and Confused.
He's a street racing guy, and he's just kind of, he ends up having somewhat of a career beyond that in the sequel, but ultimately we know that he's kind of destined the same way. He's a James Dean archetype in a sense. Like, he's not going to last forever. We know that. And he didn't have to audition for this movie, by the way, because Mutrix was such a fan of that American Graffiti. He offered him the role for this.
Okay, I have a question.
Had he already done more American Graffiti before this?
No, that was 1979.
Okay.
That was, so 73 was the original, and then that.
Okay.
Do you think that this style, subgenre, however you want to equate it, of film still exists today? Like, what are more modern... Okay. Because I was going to say, what are more modern titles that would be kind of similar to this?
Well, in the 90s, you had quite a few movies similar. Like, they were different tones. Like, some were thrillers, like California, where you have these protagonist characters that you don't particularly care for.
You know what it made me think of? And I don't know why, because we know that I always connect things in weird ways, but it made me, because I just watched this for the first time, and I'm going to be honest, don't 100% understand the appeal of it either, but it made me think a lot of Raising Arizona.
Interesting. Do go on. I'm genuinely curious.
The part where they're trying to drive away and they wreck the bug just made me think of the diaper scene in Raising Arizona, where he has to go back and get, because he threw him out of the car. Like, that is where...
There's also his dream at the end where they're thinking of the great place where all the kids are there and their elderly grandparents, and he thinks, oh, maybe it was Utah. That's their Hawaii, I guess, in that case.
I'm wondering if I have a disconnect with it because this style story is gone now.
Yeah, you're looking for probably more substance.
Yeah, because I really felt like I watched nothing. And I'm being harsh, but it's like...
In that case, I would recommend you go and watch the what had to happen was the eventual parody of this genre movie, which would be Albert Brooks's Lost in America. Nathan, you may or may not
That's
agree
very
there,
much,
but yes.
yeah.
You
could argue it being called Easy Rider 2.
Yes.
I mean, I don't like, my goal is never to just go hate a film. Like, that is not my goal when I watch movies. And I'm usually pretty lax and being like, oh, it was a movie, you know. You've heard me say that before. But I just did not vibe with it at all.
For me, I'm already a fan of Diane Hull and Paula Matt and Robert Carradine and Tim McIntyre and Lee French. And
Noble Willingham.
So for me, it's just hanging out with people that I already like.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not they make the right decisions, I'm just along for the ride. And certainly the Tim McIntyre and Lee French characters, you could argue, are very much equatable to Bobby and Rose. Like, they're on their own path to nowhere, you know?
Yeah, but they're also so destructive and just harsh, too. Does that make sense?
Oh, I mean, yeah. I mean, Tim McIntyre is ready to throw down with anybody in any moment, you know?
Sure.
And I don't know. Like, I feel bad now. Like,
it's okay.
But
because honestly, you should be able to walk into this without any preconceived notions about anybody involved and just judge it on its own merit.
It is very much a time capsule of that period in time, and it may be a little hard for modern audiences to connect to because of that. I mean, the modern equivalent might be anybody who sits down to watch a YouTube video of people who have tricked out their van and are traveling across country for no other reason than just to do it. The nomad life.
That's not a movie. To me, that's like a totally different thing.
Is it?
That's like being like, yeah, because like I watch a movie because I'm going to watch, like, I don't like documentaries because I want the not real aspect of things.
The escape.
So to equate it to a real life person tricking out a van and driving across America, that's not a film. Like, you know what I mean?
It's called Supervan.
But you get what I'm saying.
But there is no plot. You're right.
It's not, I mean, there was really
there is no plot to Supervan either.
But maybe if they had built on the characters more, because you are very much thrown into these people's lives.
Yeah.
And then also in the end scene when she's sobbing over his body, her hair is not wet once. And it is pouring its ass off. Sorry, that bugged me. Because it is like visibly raining and her hair is completely dry.
It is Diane Hull, and she went through a lot of shit in the 5th floor. I don't know if you've seen that, but we'll give her a pass on that.
Is that the 5th floor where her aunt owns like an apartment complex? Or am I thinking something different? Oh.
Are you thinking of the 4th floor, the Juliette Lewis film?
Oh, is it Juliette? It's been a while since I've seen it. I didn't know it was Juliette, but like it's really fucked up. Like the aunt owns the building and the aunt dies or something and she has to go in.
This is a psycho ward, basically. She gets drugged at a discotheque and ends up in a psycho ward, and horrible things happen.
Oh, I want to watch
early performance of Robert Englund as one of the inmates. And
you said it's called the 5th floor?
Yeah.
That wasn't the New Adventures of Pippi Longstocking? I have to fix my notes. Okay.
No, she is in that. It'd make a great double feature with the film Human Experiments, which came out the following year with Linda Hayne and Jeffrey Lewis. But that's more of a prison film and a totally fucked up. There's some witchcraft in that, but it's a good double bill. It was also known as Beyond the Gate, not Beyond the Gates, which is like 12 different movies, but Beyond the Gate. And Jason will remember this. On Late Night with David Letterman, in the opening sequence, you see a theater marquee, and it says Beyond the Gate on it, and that's the movie. Anyway.
You're talking about when he was still at the RCA building, old Letterman.
The NBC, the early years at NBC.
Yeah, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, but Diane Hull did like all these like totally 70s movies, Aloha, Bobby and Rose definitely being one of them. But she did a movie called Girls on the Road, where it was like they pick up this hitchhiker who's a Vietnam vet, and he may or may not have killed some girls. You know, it's that kind of... It's another type of road movie.
But see, I love 70s. Like, 70s, I think, is the best decade for horror. Like, I love 70s movies, but I think I just... don't like anything other than horror in the 70s. I need to look at some of like films I really like and see if any of them from the 70s venture outside of horror. Does that make sense?
But what about like Scorsese? Have you seen any of those, or Coppola?
I've seen The Departed and Goodfellas.
Okay, you definitely got to watch Mean Streets and Taxi Driver.
Yeah.
I think backwards, you would enjoy a lot of Scorsese stuff. The 70s is the total testing ground for him. Who's That Knocking at My Door? Boxcar Bertha, all these films. And you might even argue that there's no point to a lot of those characters. And I'd be interested to see what you think of Taxi Driver.
I do really want to see Taxi Driver. I just never have.
You talk about unredeemable characters throughout.
Yeah.
You're getting thrown into the deep end of the pool on that one. It is.
Yeah.
But all those guys came up together through that system. You had Coppola, Scorsese. I would throw in even Spielberg.
The Hollywood
Brats. Those guys. Yeah. Along with I don't think this guy
John Milius.
Milius, yeah. I don't think this guy was a part of that group necessarily, but he came up at the same time as the rest of them.
No, but he was definitely influenced by George Lucas coming off of American Graffiti.
Yeah, Dusty and Sweets McGee was that was 71.
Which one?
Dusty and Sweets McGee, his movie.
Yeah,
prior
71.
To this one.
Yeah, which is another kind of definitely a cultish. I don't say cultish, but it's a cult. I mean, all his films don't really fit a necessary category.
Right.
Like he did stuff that just kind of like what Jason's saying, where you have a Monty Hellman type. Maybe that's too broad of a spectrum to associate the two, but Monty Hellman, all his films were just, you have to be a fan or not. Because if you watch Cockfighter, which I don't think Katie would ever watch that, but it's a brilliant character study. And it's not something most people will enjoy.
That's fair.
Same thing with The Shooting, possibly. That's like an existentialistic Western, if anything.
Well, I'm not a big fan of Westerns. And that one, I don't watch them and then go, oh, I do like watching. What did you say? What?
I was going to mention Pardon My Gun, but a Tom Keen classic.
Another box set contender. He said,
Nathan, I have never seen the movie.
Buy that.
Never seen the movie. I just love the title. It's a perfect title. Pardon My Gun. It's fantastic.
Well, it's very gracious. You know. Most outlaws don't give a shit if you care about their gun or not. So it's very nice to know. You know.
I think they would prefer you not to care about their gun.
Well, or care about it. That way you take
it depends on if you mean gun or if a gun is substitute for something else. I feel like I'm being set up here.
No. It's not a trench coat.
It just dawned on me. No. I was like, wait a minute.
What's weird is it's like a bizarre tie-in with Pardon My Sarong.
I don't know what to do with you guys sometimes. I don't know. I just know that this is an hour and 28 minutes I'll never get back.
Oh.
Sorry, guys.
If anything, perhaps that would put a spotlight on some of the talent involved that you'll enjoy elsewhere. I'm a huge fan of Tim McIntyre. I think he's totally underrated as an actor.
Gone too soon. Gone much too soon.
And he was a multi-talent. His father was John McIntyre from Wagon Train. His mother was also on that show. But he did all these TV spots, but he was also an actor in films and a composer.
A Boy and His Dog, Gumball Rally.
Yeah. He did the scores for A Boy and His Dog, and he voiced the dog character in that. And he was a great voiceover artist who did a shit ton of trailers and TV spots.
And what about Miss French, who is Donna Sue in this movie, who is also in classics like The Drowning Pool, White Line Fever, Great Smoky Roadblock.
I love White Line Fever.
History of the World Part 1, Halloween 2, Summer School. I think she was in Summer School.
She's in The Hollywood Knights.
Yes.
Being assaulted by Stuart Pankin.
Oh, damn.
On a merry-go-round. No.
And of course, we have Robert Carradine as Moxie, who is in Pom Pom Girls, Massacre at Central High, Orca. Come on. Tag the Assassination Game. All 4 Revenge of the Nerds movies. Max Keeble's big
How did
move.
they age?
Which ones?
You said Revenge of the Nerds, right?
Oh, how did they age? Not well.
I don't
Not
feel like
well.
they would.
Easy.
It doesn't mean that
Are you talking to me?
you can't have fondness for them. I'm just curious as to how well they aged.
Yeah, I think it's important to look at that, and well, any of these movies we just mentioned, you got to look at them in their context and not try to.
The year they came out, I get that.
I mean, yeah, 80s comedies had some problematic aspects to them, to be fair. Something I wanted to throw out there also, Nathan, and Katie, in case I don't know if you've seen the movie or not, but I'll mention it anyway. I watched Aloha, Bobby and Sue as a part of a triple feature one day. I watched Aloha, then Two-Lane Blacktop, and then I threw in Electroglide and Blue, which felt to me like watching the first two movies, but from the opposite perspective, if that makes any kind of sense. Because in all those movies, you have the sudden presence of the police who just kind of like, fuck, we got to deal with this now. That's Electroglide and Blue also. You have those cops out in the desert who basically just sit around waiting for somebody to come by that they can pick on. And it is kind of like watching these other movies, but from the opposite side of the mirror. I don't know if you got that impression of it or not, or if ever thought about it that way. But it kind of felt that way to me after watching these two. Maybe it's just because I watched the other two first. I don't know.
Probably, yeah, I think so, in succession. But yeah, I get what you're saying.
It has the same kind of themes, though. You have this guy who's looking to get out of his rut, and as he puts in the movie, get paid for thinking, which doesn't go anywhere either. It's sort of the same sort of doomed mission that Bobby and Rose are on, in a way. He was never going to work.
And they're also usually their own worst enemies, too.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
They're dreaming of getting out of it, but they're going to complicate it all the way through.
And almost make like every bad decision along the way.
In Bobby's case, it was sheer stupidity. In John Wintergreen's case, in Electroglide, it's his own earnestness that finally does him in. It's his own sense of morals that does it, instead of what happened with Bobby and Rose, which was just an endless series of stupid decisions that they seem to be making. Not the getting tied up with the McIntyre character, Buford. Which happens pretty late in the film. That's not necessarily a terrible decision. I mean, he does try to rescue them to some degree. He does pee in a guy's car. Yeah, and he's
very helpful. Kinda, he gives them money and,
Yeah. But it also gives him a breakthrough in his character, too. Like, I liked that whole part of it where he was like, oh, yeah, the football season, it was the first day of the first season. Like, I liked that whole, like, being knocked down a peg, because sometimes you make things more big than they are to look impressive, and then you're reminded that, hey, this isn't always how you need to take things out.
We're going to talk about his one of his few lead roles was supplied by Mutrix.
Brubaker?
He plays Alan Freed in American Hot Ones.
Oh, Alan Freed, that's right. Okay.
Yeah. And he's brilliant in that. And he only, I think maybe Sacred Ground might have been the only other like total lead role that he had as an actor, because he was always this character actor. And then he died very early, like 1986, I think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was 41, I think.
Yeah. And one of my absolute favorite performances of his, and it's not a well-known movie, but I love it, and I don't know, Katie may not dig it. It may be another one where you're like, why are we watching these people for 2 hours? But
I mean, I've watched shit because I love the people who are in it. I've done that. Like,
well, okay, this one's called Fast Walking, and it's got James Woods and Kay Lenz, and Tim McIntyre plays an inmate who's like this controlling force within, and then James Woods works in the prison. It's kind of a reverse on Tim McIntyre being in Brubaker, where he's one of the cops or one of the police force in that. Police force, but you know what I mean, guards.
A police squad, sure, if you will. Yeah.
But he also did the trailer narration and TV spots for Brubaker, so the little and Superman 1 and 2. He did the trailers for that. That's his voice.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I know that, is it Lee French? How her first name's pronounced? You said it earlier. Yeah. I can't remember. She did some voice work also. In fact, she was one of the voices in the video game Zork Grand Inquisitor of all things.
Okay.
I did not know that before researching this.
Well, she kind of got, I mean, she was on, again, like Tim, where she was doing a lot of television and made her mark kind of on the Smothers Brothers.
Smothers Brothers, I love that.
Yeah.
And of course you have Noble Willingham as Uncle Charlie.
He plays like the same role over and over again. Isn't that great?
Drinking whiskey at 8 o'clock in the morning, get on the car lot. And of course how many movies did he do? Like 200, 300? I don't know. I've lost track.
That guy, he was like, he's like the M. Emmett Walsh, where you're in everything.
Big Bad Mama, Chinatown, relatively obscure film, Sheila Levine is Dead and Living in New York.
I like the title. I love really long, obscure titles like that.
Marquee Busters, as I like to call them.
Yes. I think that's why I like giallo films so much, because they always have those weird, crazy-ass titles.
Sentence. Yeah.
What have you done with Solange?
I used to think those were translation errors, but I think they did that on purpose.
And then did you ever see the sequel to that?
I didn't know it had a sequel. Wait, me or him?
You, Katie.
Yeah. Solange?
Yeah.
What is it? Wait, you're being a poop.
No. It was in the 80s, and Janet Jackson did the theme song. What have you done to Solange lately?
I don't. I knew we were getting there, and I was like, I'm just gonna let it happen.
What happened?
You happen.
Well,
God,
on the subject
the original title is so
these
long.
kind of horror movies, Katie, you have yet to make your Eddie Olmos connection here.
Yeah, that was going to be my Wolfen reference.
Chicano #1, Edward James Olmos, in his first speaking role.
Markers, man.
That's it.
He actually has a longer, like, evidently there was a scene that was cut where when Robert Carradine's waiting at the pool hall for Paul Le Mat to show up, and he's on that date with Diane Hull the whole time, and they're just losing track of time, Eddie Olmos and his gang beat the shit out of him. And so that scene was cut, and evidently it was a pretty great scene. Robert Carradine on record was pretty pissed about it being missing from the film when he saw it.
I wonder why. I wonder what resulted in it being taken out.
Well, they had to find a place. They had to find a place to put a third needle drop on Tiny Dancer, so the scene had to go.
Maybe. There are 3 other Elton songs in that. Come on.
And they use each of them 6 times.
Your song, of course, Benny and the Jets, which is that's probably why this is one of my favorites. Is that opening title is just beautiful.
Well, they reused the footage from the sex scene and put a different Elton John song over it the second time. Because the first time they used Tiny
the ads
Dancer,
dropped right in the middle of the weird sex scene.
It's not that weird. It's
very close up. Very close up.
Honky Cat is also on the soundtrack.
Right. Along with The Temptations, kind of a version of Bob Dylan song, kind of. I don't think it's him doing it. I'm not sure. It doesn't sound like him. At the end, over the end credits.
No, it is. It is like a Rolling Stone.
It is?
It's him. Yeah.
Wow.
You got Little Eva, Locomotion.
Mm-hmm.
Signed, Sealed, and Delivered by Stevie Wonder.
The soundtrack was phenomenal.
Yeah, Since I Fell For You by Lenny Welch is a great fucking song, and I love how it's used in this film.
I like how they used Locomotion also in that, with the Volkswagen tipping over as they...
Yeah. I did like that scene.
Back over the curb. That was well done.
Like how it was done.
Even though Paul Le Mat already has like the blood pack on his head when he hits the windshield. You're like, okay.
And he's clearly like trying to aim for a certain spot on the windshield too when he kind of comes up there and tilts a little bit.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've ever been inside one of those old VW Bugs, but it is crazy hard. I can't imagine how you would actually launch yourself out the driver's side window of one of those things the way he does. He had to have been... I'm not sure that's physically possible to do.
I have to go back and watch Herbie Goes to Monte Carlo to see if that's... if that ever happens to Don Knotts.
They do a giant car wreck of that nature. Don Knotts hits the windshield and dives out the car. I don't remember that part. You sure?
Of course, Dean Jones. Herbie and I are going to win the race. Good stuff. What else do we have to cover aside from Katie's glowing review?
Sorry.
It's okay.
love is a weird concept to me. So when somebody does it in the span of 12 hours and you're willing to give up your whole life for it, it is, even in a movie world, is highly unbelievable to me.
Okay, well, I do have to mention this. There is a slight cameo in this film. Cameo. It's by Humble Harv Miller, who is a radio disc jockey that recently got a bit of resurgence as being one of the voices of KHJ Box Radio in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Okay.
And Tarantino, of course, used the original broadcasts of him and The Real Don Steele. What's interesting is he was at KHJ from 1967 to 1971 because he murdered his wife. And he went to jail for about 3 years. Basically, it was one of those love passion things. His attorney claimed that she pulled the gun on him in an argument, and he grabbed the gun and it fired
and
against
defended it, a self-defense type thing.
Yeah, but he ran. He's fled the scene immediately. It took like a couple weeks for them to find him.
But they wouldn't have believed it if he told the truth anyway.
Right. It's kind of like Bobby and Rose.
What does this remind you of?
It's a bit of a parallel. But who knows if that's actually what happened. But that's
probably
what got him. Yeah. At any rate, so by the time he did this movie, he actually was at KKDJ 102.7 FM. So that's the actual radio station he was working at. It was the second one after getting out of prison. And he also is in the Hollywood Nights. He's the disc jockey that you see live when, I think it's the Mike Bender character, takes the tire to the thing. You remember on the prank or whatever?
It's been a long time since I saw it, yeah.
Yeah. So he's actually in it. He had a kind of a storied career. I mean, there was, of course, the stigma to him that kind of damaged the rest of his career. But Mutrux liked the guy and had him in his movies, so...
From what you guys have said, he seems to work with the same people a lot.
Yeah, like
it's common among many directors, yeah.
Yeah, Lee French for sure.
Oh, definitely, but this guy particularly right now.
I would agree.
Anything else? Oh, we didn't mention Wolfen enough. Wait.
Well, I wasn't even going to mention Wolfen. I was going to particularly mention the werewolf episode because this is now below Howling.
Oh.
Which was my lowest rated film of what we've watched so far.
From the beginning, we told everybody, you may not like everything.
Oh, definitely.
But at least you've seen it now. You know what this is about. And who knows? Maybe sometime down the road, you'll take another look and think, oh, my first impression of Electroglide in Blue was pretty negative. I didn't like it at first. The first time I saw it, I didn't get it. Maybe it's because I heard too much about it already. But watching it again in the context of these other movies got me an entirely different perspective on it. Maybe that will happen at some point down the road with you and Aloha and Bobby and Rose. Maybe not. I don't know.
Or you'll maybe venture off and see stuff like American Graffiti and kind of get more of
American Graffiti has been on my list for a while.
I think you should. I think that's almost like an essential prerequisite to seeing this film because you could see how it would have inspired something like this.
Oh, yeah.
Street racing, that kind of thing back in the day. Mm-hmm. And then leading up to like 1979.
American Graffiti launched more than a few ships, yeah.
And the Bobby Carradine movies that he did after this, like you were saying, with one of my all-time favorites, Pom Pom Girls. So much fun.
I thought you were going to say Max Keeble's Big Move, but okay, Pom Pom.
No, I wasn't going to say that. I used to have a Yahoo group dedicated to Robert Carradine that I ran.
Of course you did.
15, 20 years ago. And Aloha, Bobby, and Rose was like one of those that I was so desperate to get like stills from to have in the, I mean, this is so ancient. They don't even have these anymore, I don't think. But it was difficult to find photos from this film because it was so obscure at the time.
Mm-hmm. I feel like it still is now.
It is.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's just not as well known. Like what he was saying in the beginning of it being as popular as it was in theaters, it's kind of weird that it's now obscure.
Yeah.
It's like an alternate reality of sorts or something where...
Which seems to go like if it doesn't succeed in theaters, then it becomes a cult classic later, and if it succeeds in theaters, then you never hear about it again. Like it's I'm not saying 100% across the board, but
no, but it does happen,
seem to be that way.
And there's often misconceptions about what we deem failures.
Yeah.
I think we've talked about it before. Showgirls has been lambasted as one of the biggest bombs of all time, but it was actually number 2 when it opened at the box office for an NC-17 movie.
The theater I was in was packed.
Yeah, and it was there was no defeating the first slot, which was 7. So
yeah,
not bad.
Any final thoughts on Aloha and Bobby Rose other than, I would say be sure to check it out. Make it a double feature with something like Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry. Maybe that'll help get you into it more. I don't know, but it's definitely worth your time, I think. Nathan, I know this is one of your favorites.
It's a feel-good movie for me, which I know sounds crazy,
bizarre,
but it's like comfort. It's comfort food.
Sure.
I definitely get that.
Having that, I've watched it probably 20 times, probably. I don't know. And it's I can have it on in the background and just be into, just that vibe that it has, I guess.
And if you don't like Elton John at all, please don't watch this movie.
I just really like Elton John.
We'll do a smash cut of how many times Tiny Dancer is dropped into a movie.
Or Tony Danza, as I like to refer to it.
Hold Me Closer, Tony Danza? Yeah.
I have a friend who has a Tiny Dancer tattoo.
Nice.
How big is it?
Her foot.
It's 12 inches long?
I didn't say a foot.
She got a tattoo of her own foot? No, on her foot of Tiny Dancer.
And Tony Danza.
I'm done.
Now, you show somebody your foot and it's got a tattoo of Tony Danza from Going Ape on it, you better have a story about how the fuck that happened to back that shit up.
Or you show somebody your foot with a tattoo of Tony Danza who has your foot tattooed on him that has a Tiny Dancer tattoo on it.
About existentialism. Whoa. Wow.
There we go.
And if you know the difference between Tony Danza in that movie and Tony Danza with another ape in Cannonball Run 2, that's even, oh my God.
On that stunning bombshell, I think it's time to draw this episode to a close. Graciously. Thank you all for listening. Go watch Aloha, Bobby and Rose. We'll catch you next time.
Or not.
Oh, yeah.
Well, once again another show has drawn to a close. Thank you so much for listening. The Smooth Thrills Radio Hour is a production of Ghostcraft and is recorded live in Dallas, Texas. Please email your questions and comments to autopilot@smooththrillsradiohour.com or drop us a message on Instagram. Enjoy the rest of your day.
This has been a Ghostcraft presentation.